The one thing I'd say about that good to great mentality, and I completely agree with that, but what that is an acceptance of being a B player, an acceptance of being something. And so you will have B's and C's. It's what you do with them that makes it next level.
Welcome back to the Culture Based Podcast. I'm Dustin, he's Blake, and today we're diving in episode 94. We're on this A player conversation, talking about developing B players into A players. Quickly, before we get into that, I want to remind you that everything we do here at the Culture Base is to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and develop a scalable team to get them there. You can learn all about that at theculturebase.com. But we're going to dive right into today's episode, Blake. Let's start off with the problem of B players to A players. All right, so first thing we need to understand is this whole concept of A players, which we talked about a few episodes ago. Just it wasn't that many ago, maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago. But this concept of A players was introduced by Jack Welch. Blake, you want to kind of give us that rundown real quick?
Yeah, so Jack Welch talked about how he believed that in an organization, 20% of your organization are probably A players, your high performers, high potential. The next 70%, the middle 70%, are your B players. They're your solid contributors with potential in growth. And then your bottom 10% were your C players. Okay, so these are underperformers who need to improve or move on. So, and I honestly agree with that a lot. Like that, I think in a normal organization, that's probably what you have. And I think that the idea of those are improve, like coach them up or coach them out, right? They like your C players need to go if they're not in the right place. The problem is I don't believe that this is to me, this is a fixed mindset. And what Jack Welch would do is just cut the bottom 10%. I personally don't believe this. I believe when you give an intense amount of clarity and the right amount of coaching, doesn't mean an intense amount of coaching, it just means the right amount of coaching, your A players can increase. And who wouldn't want to have an A player team, right? So we, like even at Ridgeline, we have 70% A player. Last year, our goal was 70%. We got there. This year, we're trying to increase to 90%. That's going to take a ton to get there. But that means, I mean, if essentially all we're trying to do is help our C or coach our C players up or out, then that means we're getting rid of people who don't belong on the team. And then really where our work is helping continue to guide A players, which shouldn't be a ton of effort, honestly. It's just a ton of clarity. And then our effort is going to live in the B players. And how do we help B players become A players? So I think that's probably where I would say, like, this is where the whole framework is.
Yeah, and so we're spending this episode before we dive into the next 10. The next 10, we're going to break down the framework of the A player, and we're going to talk about the 10 different areas that make up an A player. But as Blake was saying, Jack Welch had that middle 70%, whether it's the middle or not. 70% is still the majority, right? So if the majority of your team is B players, we wanted to kind of give a special episode to this of how to develop B players to A players before we start diving in over the next 10 episodes. We're going to break down the 10 areas of the A players. But before we move on to the solution, I just want to paint the picture like this for you. Great coaches don't always recruit A player talent, but they coach B player talent to become A player talent. And that's all going to start with identifying, right, Blake? It's all going to start with identifying who those B players are, which we're going to talk about next in the solution.
Yeah, so the identifying, when we talk about these 10 areas, and I'm not going to dive into all of them, but we've got to have a way, even with subjective information, to come up with more objective ways to gain data. If you don't have data, you don't have stance. Okay. Like, sure, someone can do something off the wall and you get rid of them. You can get rid of people for any reason whatsoever. But when you understand ways to truly have metrics to these different areas, you provide clarity. And I think most of the time that's the problem, is that we're just missing clarity. Some person may be on just like the edge of turning from a B to an A player, and all they're really missing is clarity. Sure, there could be a lot of other things they could be missing, but you don't know. This is the problem with people, is we can't read someone's mind. We can't understand the whole person who is standing right in front of you. There is a certain part that you've got to have a little bit of trust in some kind of system or some kind of framework that's going to help you get there. But if you don't have clarity, I promise you won't get there. Okay. So the A player, I'm just going to give it like a real high level clarity perspective here. A player, we've kind of broke into 3 core categories. Okay. So there's 10 attributes, but there are really 3 categories. And the 3 categories are: 1, the competence. Okay. This is like the foundation of what an A player is. The second one is character. These attributes are multipliers. Okay. And then the third category is curiosity. And these attributes are like the growth engine of a team. Okay. So as we think about those 3 categories, today, all we're going to talk about is just that competence level. Okay. So there are really 3 areas, and I will argue that I believe these top 3 attributes, and I believe that competence as its overarching parent, if you will, really make up the first 3 and the top 3. Like if you weighted all the 10 attributes, these top 3 at some level, I believe, are still the top 3. Even if they change around within themselves, I believe they're the top 3. So I think they weight the highest, because when we talk about A players like Michael Jordan, it wasn't like he had a good personality and that's why he was an A player. He was the basketball guy, right? Like if somebody who knew nothing about basketball, they knew that name. So why? Because I think those top 3 are these: accountable for actions, reliability, and quality of work. So accountable for actions are the people who just take ownership of the results. They want the ball at the end of the game, right? They'll take the positive, they'll take the negative, because they know they learn from the negative. They follow through on commitments without excuses. That's a big one there. And they proactively communicate when obstacles are going to arise. Next, reliability. So this is like they consistently deliver what they promise. If you thought, reliability is they show up, that's a C-level version of reliability. That's like those people are just expect you got to coach them up or coach them out. Don't waste too much time unless they're B player and you want to develop them more. But the reliability we're talking about at an A-level perspective is they are constantly who they are. They're not 1 day out of 5. They are 5 days out of 5. Others absolutely can depend on these people. They maintain consistent performance standards. That means they raise the bar to everyone else around them. I think of Kobe. That guy, no matter what room he was in, he raised the room around him and everyone upped their game. And then the last one on competence is your quality of work. So these A players produce work that meets or is absolutely beyond what the standard is. They take pride in their craft. Like, do you ever been around someone who just loves their craft? Right. And you're kind of like, gosh, this is all they talk about. And they're like, yeah, it is, because I love the craft. I love being around a chef who talks about food at a way that I'm like, oh yeah, peppers, they come from gardens. And they're like, no, this is what you need to know about peppers. And you're like, you're right. I didn't know I needed to know that, but you're right. I needed to know that about peppers. Those people, they just get their craft and that's all that they're consumed in. Okay. Yeah. And on the flip side, I think that neatest things about masters or A players in their craft is they never see themselves as masters. They're constantly, continuously seeking to improve their output. When I was in New York a while back, I got to go to 11 Madison Park. You've probably heard about it if you're into like the Michelin restaurant stuff. And it was really neat. It was like, man, I want to go experience this. And back in 2020, they said, we're going to go vegan, which is not hugely popular in the food industry necessarily. And while I was there, I asked why. I was like, hey, what was that? Why did you guys make that decision? And they said, well, chef wanted, like with meat, there's so far you can go with meat, but chef wanted to do something when everyone else was just trying to meet standard, wanted to go to new places, wanted to go travel the world and experience other vegetables or other options like that other places were doing, and then bring those back. With meat, I mean, a cow's a cow wherever you go, right? But when you go and experience a different climate in a different way, like it's really impactful. And he wanted to keep learning. And I just it stuck with me. That made this story because it stuck with, wow, that person did not see themselves as a master beyond their learning. And I love that. So
yeah, I'm gonna speak for the steak lovers and say maybe a cow is not a cow everywhere, but I understand what he's doing. There's more to work with, right? There's only but so many animals, but there are a vast majority of food outside of just carnivore meat. So, Blake, I want to ask you this. Jim Collins says in Good to Great, obviously good is the enemy of great. And if we're talking about B players to A players, you would say B or good, right? That's what what's his name said? Jack Welch said that these are the good, kind of solid, dependable, right? They're good, but not great. So Jim Collins says good is the enemy of great. And one of the key reasons we have so little of greatness, key reasons we have so little that become great, is we don't have great schools because we have too many good schools. So we don't have A players because we have too many B players. You could almost look at it like that as well. So as we close out the solution area, Blake, can you just give a couple of tips on what you have seen and what we have used at the culture base to take B players to A players?
Yeah. So the one thing I'd say about that good to great mentality, and I completely agree with that, but what that is an acceptance of being a B player, an acceptance of being something. And so you will have B's and C's. It's what you do with them that makes it next level. So when we look at B players, if your mentality, kind of like Jack Welch, was, well, they're good, they'll do their thing. No, how do we make them A players? And so in those top three focus areas we talked about, with like developing accountability, how do we make B players A players in developing accountability? So those who maybe struggle a little with ownership, because that's essentially what accountability is the result of owning what you do. So as a coach, helping them create clear outcome-based expectations, implementing regular check-ins, helping them understand, and this one sounds like so base to A players, but to B players, like you had to start somewhere, using the what, why, when, how framework for every assignment, for everything you do. And you're like, yeah, but like you just think that way. That's not true. You had to learn that. You were not born. You didn't come out of the diaper and go, I probably should start using the toilet. Here's what I need to do. Here's why I need to. No, that's stupid. You had to learn this.
Yeah,
and so your B players, that's right. B players have to learn this too. They maybe know a few of those things, but trying to help them understand the framework. I don't care what the assignment is. I really don't. Do they understand how to take an assignment, take an idea, and go through that? And then do you establish consequence and reward systems tied to accountability? You as the leader, if you're not doing that, you're not giving a reason for ownership. You're giving a reason for existence. We don't want that. You want to give a reason for ownership. And then I think this is a big mindset part here. And when you're developing people, like even the whole farm league system was about developing the talent, the character, and the mindsets, right? So like as you're trying to help develop a mindset here, one of them I think that's important for developing accountability is a no excuse mindset. Okay. That's not to say things don't happen, but there are no excuses on the backside. We have to take ownership at some level. And you might be like, yeah, but it wasn't really my fault. That's an excuse. That's an excuse right there. Yeah. Always take ownership.
Yeah.
and I know those are going to shudder when I say this, even if it doesn't look like it's your fault, get used to taking ownership, because when you can take ownership of something, you can take control of the outcome. But if you don't do that, then you have no control of the outcome.
That's right.
That's a problem.
That's right. Okay? A players are leaders. Good leaders give credit and take blame.
That's right.
Simple as that.
That's right. And what's the worst thing in the world if you accidentally took ownership of a failure? What's the worst thing? Not much, guys. Like, you will bounce back. Those people always bounce back.
100%.
Just a couple others really quick. Building reliability in B players to A players. Start with smaller commitments. Okay. I know everyone wants to hit it out of the park all the time, but watch Moneyball. You'll see base hits are okay. Okay. So start with smaller commitments. Just get on base. Implement personal project management systems with your team. With these B players, create accountability partnerships with A players. Okay. This is a great one to do, is find an A player, hook them up, help them see what an A player looks like when it comes to reliability.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't put them with a B player that you think, well, maybe they'll grow each other. Okay. That's blind leading blind. I don't know if you've read that. It's not good.
Yeah.
What's
that? Don't put them with the B plus player. They're like, well, they're almost an A player.
Yep. Can't do that.
Right.
The last one's evaluating quality standards. This one's tricky at times. It's a little more tangible, though. I think one of the things a lot of times we'll do is, like, you want to be careful of being like, why can't you be like your brother? They did this. Okay. Don't connect names, connect examples. Hey, here's what an A player looks like when it comes to this work right here. Don't be like, why can't you be like John? He does it right every time. Okay, now you just made that guy hate John, and that's not great. That's not a good team mentality there. So you want to implement good peer review processes, which the A player process does do. When we'll dig more into that. And then, this is one I'm pretty passionate about, is setting up like craft improvement sessions. What are you doing for your team? And maybe you're kind of far from what the craft is, or the service is, or the product is that you build. Maybe get back into it to figure out what are the things we need to do to help people understand this process, understand this craft. And then not just there, how do they take it to that next level of advancing whatever it is? So I think these are some of the little things we can do. Like we said, we're going to dive into this much deeper later on. But I think these are things that are going to help us not necessarily dive into a lot of B player relentless work, but relentlessly clear work. Okay. Yep. If you've got clarity on where you're going and you have data to back it up, and you can help someone come along and develop from a B player to an A player because you provided the most important part in the beginning, clarity, the relentless work won't feel like tireless, monotonous work. It'll feel like impacting work.
Yeah, I love that clarity too. I think it's going to lead us into our action steps as we close out today's episode.
Cool. Well, I feel like I just hit a lot of the action steps.
I do too. I was going to give one big action for our action step today, which is tune into the next 10 episodes, because the next 10 episodes, we're going to break down these 10 attributes that make up an A player. And we're going to start with those competency ones that Blake hit a ton on today. Next week, we're going to talk about being accountable for actions. And then the following week, we're going to hit reliability, and then we're going to hit quality of work. And we're going to hit those top three, and then we're going to make our way down the list. So gather your team around the YouTube or the podcast listening station and take notes and start the conversation about these A players within your organization. Anything you want to add to that, Blake, before we wrap up?
Nope. I think we're good.
So Culture Base is using the A player system to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and develop a scalable team to get them there. So if you're interested in partnering with us on how we can implement this in your organization, go to theculturebase.com, click on the contact page, hop on our calendar, and we'd love to talk to you about that. Next week, we are back. Episode 95, talking about accountability for actions as we kick off the next 10 weeks of how to be an A player. We'll see you then.